Hello, I'm Joey Ferwerda. I've been doing Blender stuff for quite a while, and I will be talking about Blender HMD and Floss VR development. Quick introduction. I'm a game developer and have been doing games and programming and consulting since somewhere 2010, 2011-ish. I've been using Blender since 2011, mostly with my company Thorworks, doing game engine development, creating a game engine which loads blend files and doing all kinds of fancy stuff with that. And kind of rolled into the virtual reality game in 2013, doing early development and integration when the first Oculus Rift came out. But because our entire pipeline was Blender-based, eventually we were thinking about things that we could do with Blender and things we could do with VR. And funny enough, after the whole VR boom started happening and the consumer editions would start going out, there was this fun little project by the Blender Institute called Caminandes VR. It happened last year. It was a hush-hush project that the Blender Institute did together with Google. Google approached Blender and basically said, well, we want something that we can show on our cardboard platform that we can use to demonstrate the cardboard functionalities using open source content and available content. So the Caminandes team was asked to do a short bit, about a minute, to render L'Amigos, the third Caminandes movie, in VR. And I got hired as a consultant and developer, initially doing advice about how should cameras work for virtual reality, to reduce things like motion sickness, what are comfortable environments for VR, technical advice about the convergence in cameras, about distance points and stuff like that. And I was asked to clean up a little Python add-on by Delay and his little team, which was made for Oculus previewing. Clean it up and get it working in Blender and stuff like that. But that was a bit difficult. This was what I was hired for initially, and this is what I ended up doing. So the performance was slow. Python and real-time VR is not something that mixes really well. Things were single-threaded. On heavy scenes, the tracking would stop working well. So if you would turn your head 90 degrees, your head would move 12, and that's really bad, really vomit-inducing. So eventually, instead of doing just consulting and doing a little bit of VR stuff with the Python add-on, I poked Severin, who is a Blender developer. He currently calls himself the only UI dev, which is kind of true. He's working now on awesome stuff like render layers and other really important stuff, 2.8 related. So I poked him. He was at the Institute for a week. And I said, hey, dude, I want to do something native. I want to see implementation. Can you help me with UI? Because I'm not touching that. Time is too short to work on UI stuff. So we basically pulled 2 all-nighters, 48 hours of time, because my time was running out. And I really wanted to get this proof of concept going. And we eventually implemented something called OpenHMD, which is the nice little icon we have right bottom. So the hurdles we were having with Blender and virtual reality in general is there were a lot of devices coming out. You got Oculus Rift, you got the HTC Vive. I think the PlayStation VR was announced, called Morpheus. And there were all other kind of devices starting to ship, starting to happen. One of the problems was Windows, because the Blender Institute does not use Windows. So everything had to happen on Linux or Mac OS X. For the 2 people who used OS X. But that was a problem because most of the APIs were Windows only. There were license issues if you wanted to implement multiple devices at the same time, because some didn't allow for other devices to be used in the same application, because that would infringe some license. And a lot of the frameworks would introduce way too much external dependencies that we couldn't handle in Blender, because dependencies are kind of like currency. You have a set amount of that, and then you're done. Otherwise, probably all the platform maintainers will quit, and that's a problem. So we ended up with OpenHMD. This is the preview build that I had after the 48 hours. You see on my left screen Blender, on the right screen my full screen HMD view, and my Oculus in the left button. And you can just see my little llama next to my cup of coffee over there, but that's a different story. So we had something working. We had something natively implemented in C, in Blender, and it solved most of the issues that we were having. It's a multi-platform library, Linux, OS X, Windows, FreeBSD, Android. It runs on ARM. Someone compiled it on PPC for whatever reason. Someone compiled it on MIPS for some other weird reason. And people are porting it to whatever. It's a compact C library with stable API, open source, Boost software license, so compatible with the GPL2. We have an active developers group, and I became developer somewhere around 2014-15, co-developing this library. All these nice little devices we have in the screen over there are supported at this moment. So regardless of your operating system and regardless of your device, you can plug it in, and it would work to some form or degree, because it's still reverse engineered most of the time, and not every functionality is finished yet. But that didn't mean that we would not run into any problems. Can somebody guess what this is that we have on the screen right now? If you guessed default cube, you're absolutely right. So from here to here, this is called matrices. This is called math that I rather not do for a second time in my life. But eventually, of course, it's got solved, it's got fixed. And I've been working with Julian on getting something shipment ready, to get something ready for Blender that we could ship as part of Core Blender for quite a while. And the nice thing is that I'm going to show how it works right now. So this is Blender. This is the HMD build that we have currently right now. A nice functionality. I'm plugging in my Oculus real quick. The entire idea is that regardless of operating system or device, of course, with a compatibility list in the documentation somewhere, so almost TM. Let's hope it hot plugs. I didn't test it yet. We have in the T panel a small little tab down here called HMD View. What this will do is it will clone the current view. Let's put it in the material mode, and well, let's do something else than a default cube, because this is kind of boring. There we go. This is something else than a default cube. It has a Suzanne in it. It's 20% better now. So we can clone it with an HMD view. And normally you would drag this to your device. Currently we only support extended mode devices. On Linux and OS X, that's not a problem, because direct mode is barely implemented on these platforms anyway. On Windows, you need to force your application in extended mode, or your HMD in extended mode. But we will have direct mode access soon, so hopefully eventually we won't need this anymore. But due to the presentation, I'm just going to do this on my primary screen. And if you start the session, we now have a real-time Oculus viewport rendering the scene. Everything is nice and smooth. I can head bang and it will still track perfectly. We have some nice optimization where we can use the mouse pointer to click wherever you would expect things to happen. UI is actually readable, which was a big problem. It's not perfect yet, but the offset is done in a certain way that you're able to read the text, regardless of lens distortion or stuff like that. Everything is interactable. We can, let's select the monkey. Hopefully, I'm missing my 3D cursor. Things are doing a bit weird here, probably because of the screen share. But everything is interactable and usable as normal. So there have been people already using this, compiling it themselves, and doing all kinds of cool things with it. Some people are people who are using it for themselves and just want to stand in a room whenever they're doing architecture or something like that, see the actual scale of things, because scale is something difficult to measure if you're just seeing everything on the screen and just moving objects while being in the virtual space. It can be useful for people creating stereoscopic video. It can be useful for people doing demonstrations of scenes. If you're a real estate agent, you can show off different types of buildings and whatever. And one of the nicest cases that we have come across is that one of our contributors, Xiam, he needed to create something for his girlfriend, wife, not sure, one of the two. Sorry about that, Xiam. He wanted to create something, and his significant other wanted to give some feedback on it. So he gave her the Oculus and started modeling, and in his normal screen, and doing all his regular Blender stuffs without being bothered with the visual stuff. And she could see everything in real time happening and give advice on how big it should be, the colors and whatever. So you could even use it with multiple persons at the same time. Of course, limited to one particular device. But yeah, the implementation is almost done. We have a couple of issues, mostly regarding Windows, with the library we're using Hidapi. So if anyone is really good with enumeration of USB devices and HID devices, please contact us. All help is, of course, very nice. But the idea is to have this shipped in Blender 2.7.9. For the people who don't know it yet, there will be a Blender 2.7.9. Don't kick me, Sergey. And hopefully we were able to work on this more, introducing more features like different types of controllers. We want to implement room scale tracking eventually, so that you can visually walk around in the scene while actually walking around the scene, like the HTC Vive has, and which the PlayStation VR has possibilities for. Maybe combining it with tools like light scanners, so you can scan your own room and then implement it in VR, and then like walk to something and sit on a couch, which is actually reprojected in VR. Like there are a lot of crazy, insane things we can do with this type of implementations. And of course, in combination with the 2.8 viewport Eevee, this is going to be incredible, because if we can do the real-time rendering on Unreal Engine type quality, the possibilities are endless. So this is just a small little presentation about how this was working. There are a couple of functionalities that are nice features that we have implemented already. We have a mirror mode here, and the mirror mode will show everything on the current viewport, what the HMD is doing. So if someone is wearing the HMD and is looking at something and say, hey, do you see this? Then the camera on your normal viewport will also track with it. So you know actually what they're talking about, which is nice. It's some kind of preview window. You can set the shading modes. Rendered doesn't work yet, but I want to be able eventually to do real-time render preview. So if you're doing an equirectangular render, then it will reproject into a sphere, and you can sit inside of the sphere looking around, looking at the actual 3D video getting rendered in front of your eyes, something like that. That would be... sorry? Inside, yeah, if you're rendering a rectangular video with cycles, you would be able to preview that within the VR scope. So these are features planned for the future, which will probably be a bit more difficult to implement, of course. But it's nice to have these kind of things. a lot of things are in progress, or at least under consideration. We also have the opportunity, if you have multiple types of devices, to select your native device, to use your rotation or disallow your rotation. If you want to manually rotate the HMD for some reason, you're able to set custom IPD. If your device doesn't have the compensation for your lens distance, then you can do this in software, and it will automatically synchronize with the firmware of the HMD if available. So this is the current implementation. So it's marked for 279, and it's been marked for 278 as well. We run into a couple of issues. We just recently, about a week or two ago, squashed most of the bugs we had during another crunch with Severin in the Blender Institute working on this. We still want to ship for 279, and we'll try to get everything in master in a week. And hopefully people will start seeing it on the build pod and doing tests. There will be a public post about it, how to get it and how to use it, what the device compatibility is. Documentation will go out soon. So these are all kind of nice things that will happen eventually. These are places where you can find me if you want to shout at me, because shouting at people is a popular thing to do. I'm on IRC, of course, the only Joey or the only bouncer, depending on if I'm on my account or my bouncer. On Freenode, you can find me on Twitter, Joey Ferwerda, and I have a blog since a couple of weeks now, a couple of months, called Program All the Things, where I talk about the hurdles that I have with HMD development, programming in general, Blender implementation thingies, basically everything that interests me in relation to programming. And check OpenHMD. It's a fun little project. If you have HMDs that are not supported, please help out. We have a documentation guide on how to get captures from your HMD, how to reverse engineer it, what the steps are to optimize it. It might even be that we already have a driver for your HMD, but that is just in branch yet. We recently worked on the Pimax 4K. We recently worked on OSVR 2, HDK 2. We recently worked on the LG 360 VR, which is being problematic. So please check openhmd.net to see if there's anything that is not supported yet or is supported already. And all devices added to OpenHMD will eventually be supported in Blender, since it uses the library just customly maintained for this project. So are there any questions? Not in particular? No questions?
When will remote controls be supported, like the 5 points?
So I got a question about the controllers. Controllers are being worked on for the 5. The idea eventually is to be able to mix and match your input methods. So let's say you have a 5, but you want to use the Oculus motion controllers. Then that technically would be possible if we are able to implement such a thing. We have a big team working on 5, currently 3 people, which I call a big team for a bunch of people working on this in their spare time. Synchronization is difficult. We are watching to get our Bluetooth sniffers, because everything is communicated through Bluetooth, and it's a bit of a hassle to reverse engineer the synchronization of that. It's different than USB, which we reverse engineer with Wireshark and just reading packets and doing a bunch of assumptions. We even have a machine learning application that we can use to give the highest probability of layout of a packet, which is an entirely different talk. But yeah, we're working on it. Same with positional tracking. We currently only support rotational tracking. So if you have your device, you're not being able to move towards and back from your screen, since that requires most of the time external devices like USB. This is a problem in general, because in Blender at the moment it looks like we cannot have a dependency on libUSB. So we're not able to have video devices, stuff like that, within the core source of Blender. I am looking for alternatives, but maybe some forms of positionals and controllers won't be supported due to this. But things that communicate with the headset itself, like the controllers, and let's say the entire infrastructure with the external sensors and with the controllers, that technically would be possible to implement it in Blender. But it's not for 279.
Yeah.
It's a big project. So I hope to release it in a 279A or B or something like that. We're probably going to have a lot of 279. So
We got a question from the chat, by the way.
yeah.
Would it be possible to work on VR, or is it just a preview?
How do you mean work on VR?
Well, I guess he didn't see your Oculus actually there, so he thought you were just showing a preview of the...
Oh, so yeah, I was actually rotating.
Show it in the camera.
Yeah, where I can show the camera real quick. So this is the actual Oculus DK2 that I'm using, and this is what I just showed working in Blender. So it works in VR. So the screen I was showing, normally you would drag it to your device. This shows up as an external monitor, and starting the session, you would be able to show everything in 3D in VR.
Next question. What about using VGA's stereo preview?
I like that. You mean the stereoscopic stuff?
In
So
Game Engine,
yeah, in Game Engine.
yeah, he's talking about Game Engine.
Oh, Game Engine stuff. So I have been thinking about moving the VR stuff to the Game Engine as well. But since the Game Engine at the moment has a very interesting future, maybe soon, maybe. Like technically, if we would have something like a Game Engine in 2.8, it would be something that would be interested in to implement this in the Game Engine. But there already is someone who created, based on an old version, a add-on with OpenHMD with the Python bindings. He released a blend file somewhere online. I think it was Lubos who created it. But he already made an implementation where it can use OpenHMD and the Python add-on to use it in the Blend Game Engine. It just won't be native and multi-threaded and all the nice stuff that we have implemented in the core features of Blender. But it would technically be possible at the moment using that. Any other questions?
Nope.
I think that's it for me then. Thank you for your time.